Snow was driving sideways through the cottonwood copses, rendering the rolling landscape a hushed, breathless expanse. The wind moved with the cadence of recollection, starting gently before turning harsh, drawing along soot and frost in a singular, drawn-out exhalation. Through this, a woman advanced, her garment's hem stiffened with grime, her footwear splitting at the seams, her gaze fixed on a phantom that had long since ceased to exist. Marble Jameson remained unmoved as the stinging snow struck her face. She had traversed many miles since the sun's ascent, passing by unheeding conveyances and through settlements where shutters were drawn as she approached. Her hands were crimson from the chill, her knuckles cracking. Yet, it was not the winter season that had forged her resilience. It was the profound silence that had marked too many nights, unburdened by spoken endearments or offered warmth. A widow bereft of property, of offspring, and, most grievously, of compassion. She reached the periphery of the settlement precisely as the final chime for the evening benediction sounded. It reverberated across the rooftops like an omen. The sign suspended above the general store swayed precariously in the wind. Vapors ascended from chimneys, yet no soul stood outdoors. This was not a locale that embraced latecomers. She drew her wrap tighter and stepped across the frozen tracks of carriage wheels into the heart of the town. Two lads engaged in a game with a circular frame looked up, observed her skirt marked with soot and her wind-chapped, disheveled hair, and retreated into their sheltered entryway. A canine offered a solitary bark before taking cover beneath a barrier. By the time she arrived at the general store, she harbored no illusions of hope. Nevertheless, with slow, deliberate fingers, she opened the door and stepped inside. The interior warmth enveloped her with surprising intensity. The aroma of milled grain, of cinnamon, of aged timber, a substantial pot-bellied stove positioned towards the rear. Mrs. Tibbet stood behind the sales counter, meticulously counting matches into a container. She did not raise her head. Marble cleared her throat softly. "Madam, I am not here to implore charity. I merely wish to inquire if you required assistance. I am capable of sweeping, folding fabrics, or simply resting by the warmth of the stove until the snowfall ceases." The elderly proprietor looked up. Her scrutiny swept over Marble as if she were a judge appraising a pilferer. "I recall you," she stated. "Jameson's spouse from the elevated tract near Stony Ford." Marble inclined her head once. "It was consumed by fire, was it not? I heard you lost all, even the infant." Marble's jaw remained immobile. "Well," Mrs. Tibbet remarked, shrugging, "the Almighty dispatches his fiery judgment where it pleases him." Marble offered no retort, merely turned and re-entered the biting cold. Behind her, the door clicked shut. She proceeded towards the house of worship. Her footwear caught on uneven cobblestones, the wind tugging with considerable force. By the time she reached the steps, she could no longer feel her extremities. She tested the door. Locked. She leaned against the railing, drawing her arms around herself for meager protection. The bell tower loomed above her, casting elongated shadows upon the snow-covered ground. She shed no tears. No longer. Her tears had been desiccated by the residual embers of her dwelling. She did not beg either. She simply remained there, allowing the frigidity to claim whatever it desired. Then, a sound, a soft rustling akin to a rabbit skittering across snow. She turned. Two young girls stood near the plaza's edge, barefoot, with disheveled hair, clad in garments insufficient for the season. Perhaps 6 years old, twins. One clutched a wooden button tightly in her small hand. The other held a string to which a broken locket was attached. They stared intently. Marble returned their gaze. "Are you experiencing hunger?" The more vocal of the two inquired. Marble blinked in surprise. The girl advanced, pulling her sister along. "You appear to be someone who lacks a dwelling's shelter." "No," Marble replied. "I do not." The quieter twin extended a hand, touching the edge of Marble's dress. Her fingers emerged stained black. The more vocal twin narrowed her eyes. "What is that?" "Soot, from a conflagration." "Indeed? Did it originate from your own?" Marble opened her lips, then closed them. "Yes." The quiescent twin abruptly moved forward and embraced her, so readily, as if privy to a forgotten wisdom held by adults. The more vocal twin declared, "You desire a home, do you not?" Marble averted her gaze. I seek a place of repose. The girl nodded with solemnity. We are without a mother, but our guardian requires a consort. We were awaiting an opportunity to find one. Awaiting? Marble questioned, uncertain if this was mockery or an invitation into a reverie. I do not articulate extensively, but we perceive what is absent. And you seem to be someone in need of companionship. Marble's knees felt unsteady, not from the chill, but from the peculiar burden of that statement. The sensation of needing something was a luxury she had denied herself recently. The silent twin tugged at her hand. Come, we shall guide you to our abode. I do not even know your names. The more vocal twin offered a broad grin. I am June. This is Josie. Marble glanced towards the church, still sealed, still frigid. Then back at the twins. Though their feet were bare, they exhibited no tremor. She followed them. They led her through the settlement, down a winding path that meandered between snow-laden cottonwood trees, past a fence crudely mended with rope, to a weathered dwelling with a faint wisp of smoke emerging from its chimney. The porch sagged, the stable leaned precariously, but illumination shone from the windows, and a rocking chair remained in mid-sway, caught by the wind. Josie ascended the porch steps and rapped twice. June pointed with evident pride. This is our dwelling. Pa constructed it with Mama before she passed. No response emanated from within. June seemed unperturbed. She pushed the door ajar. We have brought a bride. Marble felt an overwhelming urge to retreat. Her boots seemed rooted to the snow like anchors. Inside, warmth, the aroma of simmering nourishment, a table whose edges had been worn smooth with use, a display of small carved figurines. And in the furthest recess, a man rose from a bench, tall and broad-shouldered, attired in a dark shirt with sleeves rolled to his forearms. A scar bisected his left eyebrow, and his gaze met Marble's directly, not with suspicion nor surprise, but with a placid intensity. The girls darted past him. Josie settled into a rocking chair, and June sprawled on a rug near the hearth. The man looked at Marble and offered a slight inclination of his head. Not a greeting, not an invitation, merely an acknowledgement. This is the widow, June explained. Her skirt bears soot, and her boots hold sorrow. Marble felt a near-exasperated chuckle rise within her. He gestured towards the chair near the fire. She moved towards it with hesitant steps. He did not inquire about her name. She did not solicit his. Yet, as she seated herself, the warmth permeated her being like a sacred infusion. Her fingers tingled, regaining sensation. Her eyes stung, not from smoke, but from an overwhelming ache of unexpected benevolence. He placed a bowl of stew within her reach, and then withdrew. Later, when the girls had succumbed to slumber, entwined in each other's arms, Marble rose to depart. He positioned himself to block the doorway, not in a threatening manner, but simply present. "Do you possess a more desirable destination?" he inquired, his voice rough, like gravel beneath flowing water. "If not, remain until such time as you do." She hesitated. "You are unaware of my history." "Neither was my wife, initially." Something within her fractured. She looked away, a wave of shame washing over her. "I cannot offer you what she provided." He regarded her for a protracted, silent interval, then stated, "I did not solicit that." She blinked. He stepped aside. "There are chambers there." He gestured towards a door adjacent to the hearth. She turned to express her gratitude, but he had already retreated, back to his bench, to his carving implement, and a partially formed equine figure in his grasp. She stepped into the chamber. It carried the scent of cedar and soap. A solitary blanket lay neatly folded upon the cot. An image depicted water, slightly warmed. Someone had made preparations. She did not sleep. She lay still, attuning herself to the creaking of the chair outside, the gentle murmurs of sleeping children, the low exhalation of a man endeavoring to shape the quietude into something purposeful. In the morning, she arose before the sun's arrival and discovered her boots had been cleaned, the soot removed. She sat on the porch, the chill biting at her skin once more. But this time, she felt no emptiness. She observed the girls chasing fowl across the grounds. The man emerged and leaned against the post beside her. "I shall gather firewood," he announced. She nodded in assent. He paused. "Are you acquainted with the art of baking bread?" "I once was." "You could instruct the girls, should you be remaining?" She nodded again. Then, her voice as soft as a wind-battered fence, she inquired, "What is your appellation?" "Colt." He did not ask for hers. She watched him stride towards the barn. Then, June's voice called out from behind her, proffering a piece of whittled wood. "We have fashioned a canine for you. It does not vocalize, but it remains." Marble knelt and accepted the carving. The canine lacked eyes, possessed no legs, merely a form intended to convey fidelity. She smiled, and for the first time in a considerable duration, she did not feel like an interloper in her own narrative. Marble rose with the dawn, despite her sleep having been shallow and infrequent. Morning light filtered through a warped pane, golden where it illuminated the wooden floorboards and silvery where it touched the frost-kissed glass. Her breath manifested as a visible cloud before her. The warmth emanating from the hearth had not penetrated this particular chamber. Yet, she did not begrudge the cold. It was untainted. It did not deceive. She smoothed her skirt with calloused fingers and stepped barefoot into the principal living area. The cabin emitted a creaking symphony, akin to a vessel at its moorings, ancient timbers groaning and settling. She found Colt already awake, a kettle warming atop the stove, steam coiling above his broad shoulders like the exhalations of a powerful creature. He had not yet shaved, nor spoken a word, merely moved with the same quiet certainty as an individual who had long existed without public acclaim. He offered a single nod, then placed a dented tin cup beside her. Coffee, acrid, black, and warm. The twins soon followed, padding in, their hair tousled and bearing the remnants of sleep. Josie perched on the bench, tucking her feet beneath her, while June commenced disentangling her sister's hair with a comb fashioned from bone. Colt cast a glance towards Marble, but remained silent. He then retrieved his coat, donned his hat, and stepped outside into the biting cold, an axe clasped in his hand. The door closed behind him with a sound suggestive of a promise left unfulfilled. Marble did not inquire about his destination. She washed the cups, reheated the leftover stew, and swept the ashes from the hearth. The girls observed her, as if witnessing someone delineate boundaries with invisible ink, uncertain whether these lines signified permanence or merely another impending farewell. "Do you comprehend the art of braiding?" June inquired abruptly. "I do." "Might you braid our hair?" "Papa's braids cause discomfort." Josie solemnly affirmed her sister's statement. Consequently, Marble positioned herself behind them, gently working through the tangles, murmuring nonsensical tales she did not consciously recall learning, but which seemed to emerge from some deep wellspring. The girls emitted giggles. Josie nestled into her lap as if it were the sole sanctuary shielded from the wind. When Colt reappeared, he paused in the doorway, a moment sufficiently long for Marble to register the intensity of his gaze. She did not turn to face him. He remained silent, but subsequently she discovered her footwear positioned near the hearth, meticulously oiled and reinforced along the side with a fresh strand of cherished sinew. He had not extended an invitation for her to remain, yet his preparations suggested otherwise. That evening, she volunteered to prepare the meal. The children expressed their delight, while Colt merely shifted his position. Within the larder, she observed his late wife's apron still hanging from its hook, worn cotton, once pristine white, now softened to a creamy hue from years of use and the pervasive scent of wood smoke. She refrained from touching it, opting instead for a dish towel. The stew she concocted was not without its flaws. It was somewhat thin and a trifle heavy on the salt, but the girls consumed it with gusto, and even Colt ate in quiet appreciation. Afterward, as the children attended to the dishes, Marble stood by the window, observing the now gentle wind outside. "Snow clung to every branch like lace," she murmured. "Was your wife kind?" she inquired softly, her back still turned to him. A prolonged silence ensued before he replied, "Yes." She refrained from further questioning, and he offered no additional details. That night, she dreamt of a dwelling where the windows remained unblemished by rattling panes, and the hearth's fire never faltered. The following morning, she was roused by the sound of hammering. Venturing outside, she found Colt diligently repairing the porch. His movements were precise and economical, his coat draped over the railing. The pale scar above his left brow caught the sunlight, a stark contrast against his sun-kissed skin. Marble approached cautiously. I can assist, she offered. He regarded her for a moment before handing her a nail. They worked companionably, side by side, their only sounds the rhythmic tap of hammer against wood. It felt as though they were constructing something, though she couldn't quite articulate what. By mid-afternoon, her palms bore the marks of blisters. "You're not accustomed to such labor," he observed. She raised an eyebrow. "I have indeed worked, though never for anyone who truly took notice." A faint twitch at the corner of his mouth suggested a nascent smile, one she suspected she might have come to appreciate. That evening, after the children had retired, she settled by the fire, meticulously stitching patches onto one of Colt's shirts, noting the mismatched buttons. She did not inquire whether this was his doing or his wife's. Colt entered, wiping his hands with a cloth. He paused for a considerable time, his gaze fixed upon the shirt in her lap. "You needn't," he stated. "I am aware. I did not request it. I know." He gave a slight nod, then took a seat opposite her and resumed whittling a horse from a block of oak. Time seemed to stretch, slow and sweet, like molasses flowing over a chilled plate. That night, the girls awoke in tears, tormented by nightmares. Josie clung to Marble's neck, while June sobbed into her arm. Colt stood in the doorway, a picture of helplessness. "I can sit with them," Marble whispered. He responded with a tight nod. She soothed the girls, humming a wordless melody, until they eventually drifted back to sleep beside her, and she remained unmoving. The following morning, she awoke in their bed, both twins nestled against her sides, their breath soft and warm. Colt brought in firewood, his silence as pronounced as ever, but he placed an additional blanket over the back of a nearby chair. That day, she baked bread. It was not perfect. It split along the top and cooked too quickly, but the girls enthusiastically tore off pieces, and even Colt partook. She discovered a jar of honey, allowing the children to dip their crusts. "Should we call you Mama?" June inquired, a smudge of honey on her chin. Marble froze, her breath catching. Colt's gaze flickered towards them, sharp and sudden. Josie, however, simply remarked, "You smell like home." Marble's voice, initially faltering, steadied as she replied, "Perhaps Marble for now will suffice." The children readily agreed, unfazed. Later that week, she accompanied Colt to town in the wagon. He spoke little, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable, but rather a quiet space they had yet to fill. At the general store, Mrs. Tibbet observed their arrival, her mouth contorting like an aged rope. "Well," she announced loudly enough for others inside to overhear, "that was remarkably swift, wasn't it?" Marble remained still as Colt reached for a sack of flour. "You perform chores now for a man who won't even utter your name," the elderly woman continued, her smile resembling spoiled vinegar. Colt remained silent. Marble glanced at him, sensing a flicker of something in his eyes, but he turned back to the sacks. The sheer silence, the absence of any defense against the remark, felt more impactful than the words themselves. They journeyed home without speaking. That evening, she sat outside, the crackling fire behind her. Colt approached slowly, stopping beside the porch post. "I did not answer her," he stated. "No, I should have." She offered no response. "I did not believe it significant." She finally turned to look at him, his eyes darker than the night sky. "I have been a name no one spoke previously," she said quietly. "It matters." He did not apologize, but the following morning he was already in the kitchen when she awoke. "Marble," he began, "we have run out of flour." She blinked, surprised. "I will accompany you," he added. A stirring of hope, like yeast activating, began within her. That afternoon, he set up a second cot in the girls' room. "Winter is still prolonged," he remarked. She understood. It was not a dismissal, but rather the offering of a space, a place where she belonged without expectation. The girls eagerly insisted on showing her the root cellar, their cherished treasure trove. Though merely a dugout cavity with shelves lined with pickled beans and onions, they spoke of it with the reverence of magic. Josie presented her with a chipped button as a token of affection. June vowed it would ward off nightmares. Marble carefully placed it in her apron pocket. That night, after tucking the children into bed, she returned to the fire to find Colt whittling once more. He did not look up. "I have little to offer you," she said softly. He glanced at her. "You comfort them when they are frightened." She nodded. "You prepare meals that do not taste of pine tar." This remark elicited a smile from her. He set the carving down. A rudimentary bird with wings partially unfurled, unfinished but already possessing a raw beauty. "They require a woman who will remain," he stated. "They will be hurt if I leave. Then stay." Her breath hitched. "I do not wish to become another spectral presence in their home," she confessed. "You are not—" He rose and handed her the bird carving. "I fashioned these to provide the girls with something that will not easily break." She turned the carving in her hands. It felt solid, unpolished, yet honest. "Perhaps I am not easily broken," she whispered. He offered no verbal response, but reached over and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered a moment too long before dropping back to his side. He stepped away. She stood alone by the fire, cradling the bird, and for the first time, a thought took root. Perhaps a man of so few words could still convey everything that held true significance. Spring did not arrive on the plains with blossoms, but rather crept in gradually through mud and melting snow, revealing dormant grasses beneath receding drifts and carrying the scent of damp earth on the wind. The sky relinquished its harsh gray for a softer blue, and the chickens began to lay more frequently. However, the thaw brought more than just the promise of crocuses. It brought wagons, visitors, and the inevitable murmur of voices, with them gossip that, like fractured ice, persisted long after the storm's passing. Marble hung laundry on the weathered line behind the McCrae residence, her fingers growing numb from the chill of the water bucket. The shirts billowed like banners on a battlefield she had not chosen. In the stillness between gusts of wind, she could once again discern the insidious whispers. Her name, spoken by another, not as if it belonged, but as if it were being tested, weighed for signs of shame. She turned to see the girls running barefoot through the patches of damp earth in the yard, chasing a straw doll they had christened, with a name Marble struggled to pronounce. Their laughter ascended on the breeze like something sacred, yet it did not carry far enough to muffle the insidious remark she had overheard in town the previous day. "She isn't even family," Mrs. Tibbet had hissed to the sheriff, loud enough for the butcher's wife to hear. "What right does she have to raise those girls? She destroyed her own home, and now she's cozying up inside someone else's." Sheriff Vernon, a man whose resolve had long been softened by pies and politics, had merely shrugged. "There's no law against kindness." "No," Mrs. Tibbet had retorted, "but there's a distinction between kindness and keeping a man warm without the sanctity of marriage." The words echoed in her mind hours later, long after the general store's door had closed behind her. Long after Colt had silently accepted the sack of flour from her hands, and had not inquired about her returning pale and rigid, she shook out his shirt, pinned it to the line, and turned back toward the house. The girls were dragging sticks toward the barn, proclaiming they were constructing a castle. Marble entered the house. Colt was by the stove, mending a boot sole. He looked up once, then returned to his task. She crossed the room, wiped her hands, and then hesitated. "Do you believe the town disapproves of my continued presence?" He did not answer immediately. "The town disapproves of everything," he finally conceded. "I overheard Mrs. Tibbet speaking with the sheriff." "I am aware," Marble swallowed. "She declared I did not belong." He placed the boot down. "Do you wish to depart?" "No." "Then remain." This assurance should have been sufficient, yet it was not, for a part of her, bent but not broken, craved not merely shelter, but also dignity. Not just a roof over her head, but a place that no one could claim she had not earned. The following morning, the twins engaged in a dispute in front of the post office. Marble was not present. Colt was securing a crate to the wagon. Josie had informed a neighbor boy that Marble braided their hair more skillfully than his mother. The boy had retorted that Marble was not a mother, merely someone their father was too grief-stricken to send away. June had pushed him. He had pushed back. Then Josie had bitten his hand. By the time Colt intervened, the boy's father was shouting. The general store's window stood ajar, and a small crowd had gathered, observing the girls as if they were handling flammable materials. Later that day, the sheriff rode up to the McCrae porch. Marble was mending a torn blanket. Colt met the lawman at the steps. Sheriff Vernon stroked his mustache, avoiding her gaze. "Just conversing, Colt. But people are saying your girls have become unruly, that they require a woman's guidance." He paused as if expecting a response. Colt remained silent. The sheriff attempted again. Not to imply she isn't making a sincere effort, but you comprehend. Marble carefully folded the blanket. I do. Colt turned towards her, a subtle tension in his jaw, but he uttered no words. The sheriff tipped his hat and departed. Inside, the girls sat silently on the floor. Josie had been weeping. Marble crouched beside her, drawing her into her lap. June whispered, Are we ill-behaved? No, Marble assured her. You are good, even when others fail to understand you. Josie murmured, They said you weren't truly ours. Marble felt a sensation akin to a fissure behind her ribs, not of pain, but of something far older. A pervasive sense of unease compelled her to consider flight. I'm not your mother, she stated with a soft cadence, but I am present, and my desire is to remain. Later that evening, after the children had retired for the night, she stepped onto the porch where Colt was meticulously applying oil to the hinges of the barn's lantern. The sheriff had paid a visit, she informed him. He acknowledged her statement. Their assumption was that she occupied his home for her well-being. He remained silent. She gazed towards the horizon, its twilight hues painted with a faint blue streak where the day's last light faded. I need to understand my purpose here, she conveyed. Colt set the lantern down. You bring laughter to the girls. You ensure the hearth is warm. You breathe life into things, he added, but I am not your spouse. He met her gaze. No. And you have no intention of proposing. He was silent for an extended period. Would you accept if I did? He inquired. She blinked. If I were to say yes. He retrieved the lantern, adjusted the wick, and allowed its glow to illuminate the space between them, an unspoken sentiment. Not yet, she replied. I am still endeavoring to recall my true self when unobserved. He offered a single nod. That is reasonable. He retreated indoors, leaving the door ajar. Marble remained on the porch for a considerable time. 2 days elapsed before she made her way to town, unaccompanied, with the wagon. Colt had been occupied with his work, and she had volunteered to procure sugar and needles. She maintained an upright posture as she traversed the boardwalk. Gazes followed her, slow and discerning. Upon entering the store, Mrs. Tibbet offered only a cursory glance. Marble requested needles, flour, and a modest jar of licorice confections for the children. As Mrs. Tibbet processed the transaction, she paused, her fingers drumming a rhythm on the counter. Some suggest you are not being truthful. Marble offered no response. Others believe you anticipate a matrimonial union that will not materialize. Marble met her gaze directly. Many opinions are voiced. The elderly woman sniffed. Children require honesty. Marble's voice, though low, carried clarity. Children require security, and someone who remains when discussions commence. A hush fell over the room. The young man bagging the purchases observed the counter. Marble paid, turned, and departed. The following morning, she discovered the girls in the barn, adorning the sides of the feed barrels with mud and chalk. Josie had sketched simple figures, 4 of them holding hands. One possessed untamed hair. Another wore oversized boots. One bore a mark on its head. The final figure had buttons depicted where a heart would typically reside. Marble gently touched the drawing. She is you, Josie explained. That is why we gave her buttons, so she would not fall apart. That evening, Marble found Colt seated by the fire, the familiar knife in his hand, carving a new bird. I went into town, she announced. I am aware of this. I asserted myself. He did not look up. Having anticipated this, she waited. He glanced over. How did that feel? As though I belong more here than I ever will elsewhere. He nodded, then remarked, The girls depicted you. They did. They perceived the truth. She moved closer. Do you? He set the knife aside. I see a woman who is still making her choices. That carries more significance than any whispers behind your back. She sat beside him. You could express your thoughts more openly, you know. He offered a slight shrug. Quiet words endure longer. A smile touched her lips. Then, do you ever consider the possibility of loving again? He did not reply, but extended the bird to her. Its wing was misshapen, yet it settled into her palm as if it had awaited her presence. The storm descended without forewarning. A sky that had been soft and pale throughout the morning transformed into a somber gray by midday. The wind intensified, like a long-held grievance, lashing at shutters and tugging at the clothesline. Chickens took flight. The twins raced towards the barn, their arms laden with dolls and dry corn. Colt was already transporting buckets indoors as the initial snowflakes began to descend, wet and heavy, adhering to the ground like remorse. Marble gathered the blankets from the line, her fingers moving with swiftness, feeling the chill. She could detect the approaching cold, sharp as metal and pine, the kind that muted everything but recollection. "Are the girls inside?" she inquired as Colt passed her on the porch. He nodded. "But Josie has lost something. She insists she dropped it near the creek." Marble's breath hitched. "Is she out there now?" Colt looked upwards. The barn door slammed shut in the wind. June came running. She claimed she was merely observing. She asserted she would return before the snow accumulated. Colt's expression shifted, not to panic, but to a more profound intensity. "I will find her," Marble declared, already reaching for her shawl. "I will go." He shook his head. "She ran because she feared my displeasure. She requires my voice." Colt hesitated, then removed a lantern from its hook and illuminated it. His fingers grazed hers as he handed it to her. "By the split cedar tree," he directed. "That is where they often play." The wind howled as if intent on dissuading her. She proceeded regardless. Descending the path, the snow fell diagonally, adhering to her eyelashes and saturating her hem. The trees merged into a single entity, their branches murmuring ancient warnings. Her boots slipped on the mud beneath the powdery surface. She held the lantern aloft, its illumination a wavering sphere against the muted light. "Jossie!" she cried, but the wind snatched the name away. She reached the creek, shallow and partially frozen. Beside it, beneath the gnarled cedar, a small figure was concealed behind a boulder. Marble hastened forward. Josie sat with her knees drawn to her chest, her cheeks flushed red, her braid dusted with snow. "I dropped the carving," she confessed. "The bird you gave me. I searched everywhere." Marble knelt and drew the child into an embrace. "You are worth far more than any carving. Never assume I would trade you for an object." Josie clung to her as a branch caught in a flood. "I did not wish to lose the item you touched." Marble stood, lifting her. "We will create another." She turned back, but the path had already disappeared beneath the snow. The wind had consumed the entire landscape. She tightened her grasp and proceeded. By the time they reached the dwelling, her legs ached and her fingers had grown numb. Colt opened the door before she could knock. He remained silent. He took Josie into his arms and regarded Marble as if she had returned his very heart. She removed her coat, standing dripping on the rug. June ran towards her. "You found her." "She is safe," Marble assured her. Josie stirred. "She came for me." "She always will," Colt affirmed. The fire blazed, blankets provided warmth. The storm intensified, and within the comfort of the room, silence descended. It was not oppressive or cold, but rather a profound quietude that held gratitude without the need for articulation. That night, after the children had succumbed to sleep, enveloped by quilts and dreams, Marble sat by the hearth, her dress slowly drying and radiating warmth. Her feet ached and her shoulders throbbed. Colt presented her with a mug of cider. She accepted it, her hands trembling only slightly. "Why did she venture out alone?" he inquired. "She did not wish to disappoint me," Marble responded. He nodded slowly. "She believed the bird held more significance than it did." "It did," Colt stated. "It was the first item I crafted after Mary's passing." Marble gazed into the rising steam. "I was unaware of that. It was not necessary to know." She clutched the cup more firmly. "I never had the opportunity to lay anything to rest. The fire consumed everything. No headstone, no inscription on a post, merely silent ashes." Colt looked at her, his brow furrowed gently. "I am uncertain of my role here," she added. "Not a wife, not a mother, not even a helper whom people regard with respect." "You are here," Colt stated. "That is sufficient." A faint smile touched her lips. "I do not believe it is." He reached behind the mantel. A small wooden box, smoothed by the passage of time. "I was saving this for when I felt I would know what to say," he explained. He opened it. Inside lay a single folded ribbon, a locket, and a small collection of names penned in a child's unsteady script. June attempted to spell marble last week, he shared. She felt it was a name that endured. Marble picked up the paper. Those were written backward. The B resembled a balloon, but it was hers. "Is this what the town believes I do not merit?" she whispered. He offered no reply, allowing the question to linger like wisps of smoke rising from an extinguished fire. She stood and then performed an action she had not undertaken since the day the baby ceased its movements. She opened her satchel, the one she kept concealed beneath the bed, and retrieved the sole item she had salvaged from the fire, a wedding band warped by the intense heat. She placed it on the mantelpiece next to the box. "I was someone else once," she stated, "but she perished." Colt moved to stand beside her. "Then who are you now?" Marble looked down at the uneven lettering on the paper. "I do not know," she replied, "but I believe the girls do." The thaw had brought with it mud and hushed discussions. Fences loosened their grip on their posts. Hooves sank to their fetlocks. However, it was not the melting snow that generated the rising tension. It was the town's collective gaze, sharpened by the winter's stillness and the arrival of spring. Nothing incited greater meanness in people than having something new to discuss. They arrived shortly after noon, 3 individuals on horseback, all acquaintances, known to her by name only. Leading them was Hiram Blass, Colt's closest competitor, a man burdened by old resentments, and the sort who considered politeness a sign of weakness when expressed too slowly. He halted at the McCrae property line, mud spraying from his horse's hooves. Colt was occupied splitting wood behind the barn. Marble stood on the porch, brushing sawdust from a quilt. The twins were inside, threading buttons into bracelets. Blass tipped his hat. "Afternoon, Marble." She offered no reply. "You possess a certain boldness, standing on a porch that does not belong to you." Colt emerged from around the corner before she could respond. He held the axe by its haft, not in a threatening manner, but so it was clearly visible. "This is a courtesy visit, Hiram." Blass displayed a wide smile. "Consider it an act of civic duty. The town has been discussing your situation, Colt. You are allowing a woman to reside here who is not your wife. The children refer to her as Mama, though she has no familial connection. It is not illegal." Blast shrugged. "No, but it is irregular. And irregularities tend to make people uneasy. Uneasy individuals make poor choices." Marble descended the steps. "What decision are you seeking to make today?" Blast glanced at her, his eyes briefly scanning her apron and the boots she had cleaned that morning. "Merely inquiring if you intend to depart soon. I do not wish for Colt to become entangled in gossip." Colt's voice was rough. "You have arrived with 2 other men to discuss gossip." "I came to safeguard my interests. Disputes over land have a propensity to resurface if the individuals involved begin to appear too unconventional." Colt stepped closer, his demeanor still placid. Hiram continued. "You recall the boundary lines, do you not? The boundaries near your southern property line are legally ambiguous. A judge might render a different verdict if the matter were revisited." Colt's gaze was as unyielding as steel. Marble inquired, "Do you believe this home is inherently less honorable because I contribute to its upkeep?" Hiram's eyes drifted past her. "I believe young girls deserve mothers whose names are officially registered with the church." Marble's throat felt constricted, yet her voice remained steady. "And do you believe I haven't earned a name for myself?" Colt placed the axe down with deliberate gentleness into the wood stump. "Your concern isn't about property lines, Hiram. You're here because your ego cannot tolerate seeing a man find contentment in a place where you've never experienced it." Blast's smile faltered. Marble stepped away from the porch, moving closer, her boots sinking into the recently thawed earth. "You desire official documentation to feel secure," she stated. "You crave ink and signatures as if they could ever guarantee more than one's actions. I have knelt in mud searching for a child during a tempest. I have personally scrubbed blood from this man's shirt. I have helped 2 young girls rediscover the joy of laughter. Yet, in your eyes, I remain merely smoke and hearsay." Blast shifted in his saddle. "You have spoken sufficiently." "No," she countered. "I have barely begun to express myself." She reached into her apron, withdrew a locket, and opened it, revealing the photograph within. It was of her husband, the man who perished attempting to rescue their child when the roof caught fire. This was all that had endured. Not a name, not a legal document, not even the house itself, merely this single memento. And you imagine I will revert to insignificance simply because your pride demands I remain small. The other men averted their gazes. One cleared his throat. A shift in the wind occurred. Colt stepped forward. You may depart now, Hiram. Are you threatening me? No, Colt replied. I am positioning myself between you and something I will not permit you to tarnish. Blast's jaw tightened, but his horse shuffled sideways. Weary of the confrontation, he spat on the ground, then gathered his reins. The town is observing. You two would do well to decide what narrative you wish them to recount. Marble watched them depart until they vanished beyond the bend in the track. Then she turned, her knees trembling, not from apprehension, but from a suppressed fury that had simmered within her for too long. Colt stood silently, the axe still embedded in the stump. You didn't need to say any of that, she remarked. He looked at her. Yes, I did. She went inside. Later that evening, after the girls had fallen asleep, she sat at the table, meticulously folding the same dish towel repeatedly. Colt entered, removed his coat, and sat opposite her. A considerable silence stretched between them. Then they will return. Yes. Would you like me to escort you to town? No, you could remain with the widow Harper or proceed north to your cousin's property. I am not leaving. His gaze intently searched hers. I am weary of evading individuals who have never actively contributed to building that which they are so quick to condemn. He exhaled. It wasn't precisely relief, but something akin to dawning comprehension. She rose, went to the hearth, and retrieved the bundle she had never opened in his presence. Inside lay her marriage certificate, a smoke-stained ribbon, and the child's toy spoon discovered amongst the ashes. She placed it on the table. I did not merely lose a husband and an infant, she stated. I lost the identity that allowed others to perceive me as a genuine person. Colt stood, walked to the shelf, and took down his wife's apron, still hanging there like a lingering memory. He turned and offered it to her, not with reverence, not as a symbol, but with simple sincerity. Marble stared at the apron. I do not wish to assume her position, she whispered. You have never attempted to usurp it, he responded. However, this household requires a woman who does not retreat when circumstances become challenging. She accepted it into her hands. The fabric felt soft, its edges worn, yet it was clean. He moved closer. I do not possess a ring, he said. Not yet. But I have land and 2 daughters who see you as the embodiment of the strength they aspire to cultivate. Marble looked from the apron to him. And what is your belief? He did not waver. That the fire did not signify the end of your existence. It prepared you for this very moment. She tied the apron around her waist. Outside, the wind rasped against the window pane. Inside, the fire within the hearth blazed with increased intensity. The following morning, she swept the front steps before the sun had fully risen. She carefully placed 2 carved wooden birds, one hers and one belonging to Jos, on the porch railing. At midday, June produced a button from her pocket and announced, Father says you are staying. I am, and you will wear the apron. I am already wearing it. The girl beamed. Then it is true. What is true? That when a woman rediscovers her identity, it no longer belongs to the town. Marble gazed down the road. It was deserted. The snow was beginning to melt, and somewhere deep within her, the part of her that had once been nothing but cinders softly replied, Let them speak.